3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
All right, welcome to Roots of Reality. I'm your host, Ben Baumann, and today we'll be talking about the big question facing American politics today and the foreseeable future, and that is bipartisanship still possible in America? So American politics is, needless to say, a mess. Political polarization is at historic levels not seen since the American Civil War, and concerns about the future of American democracy are higher than ever. However, throughout history, one of the key ways for society to navigate such a crisis has been working together, or in America's case, bipartisanship, where politicians from opposing parties put their disagreements aside for what is best as a country and make the necessary compromises. Now, if we think about American history, America is a nation that has been through a lot. After all, America was founded on a revolution where 13 colonies took on the British Empire to create a new nation. A tale that certainly is like a David versus Goliath-like story. And of course, compromise was key to this. After all, the original 13 colonies didn't just join together easily. And they had to make some serious compromises to even get to the point where they can put a unified front up against the British Empire. Now, some of these compromises were courageous, while others would age infamously. For example, the compromise to preserve slavery in the nation, which for the historical context of the era wasn't unusual, but many founding fathers, even at the time of the American Revolution, knew that this was morally wrong and something that could cause issues later on for the country. But ultimately, they believed that this was necessary to create what would become the United States of America. And that's one of the complexities of history, that you're grappling with these really tough questions. That's one of the complex things we have to understand when looking back at history, is that people are making decisions based on how they understand the world. So though slavery is obviously considered horrifically wrong today, because it is, at the time of the 1700s, people might understand that it's morally wrong, but yet still believe that it's acceptable enough to create a nation. Otherwise, you'd have a situation where, the southern colonies wouldn't be necessarily joining the American Revolution. And this is something that less than 100 years later would lead to another big issue in American society, because as political polarization started to tear the country apart over the lingering issue of slavery, and this was something that then President Abraham Lincoln was grappling with over the question of slavery, because though he was against slavery, he was willing to preserve it to avoid a civil war, as long as it didn't expand across the United States. But the southern states felt that he was looking to ban slavery across the country. Thus, America would split into two halves, the southern states and the northern states, due to the southern states, which created the Confederate States of America, tried to break away from the United States of America. Luckily, the Union under Abraham Lincoln emerged victorious, preventing the permanent splintering of the country. A lot of good things happened, like slavery would then eventually become banned in the United States, and Abraham Lincoln and the Union would then find a way to bring the country back together by not enacting vengeance on the South, but instead showing mercy and giving really only temporary restrictions on Southern Confederate leaders who led the rebellion. And these people were eventually allowed to live their lives mostly unpunished, with the goal of creating greater societal unity post-Civil War. Obviously, you can go and try to punish people, which there are people at the time that wanted to do. But when half your country breaks away during a civil war, you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to move forward? And the northern states decided that this was it. Though you still had serious issues with racism and Jim Crow laws, which was kind of like an extension of slavery. You had sharecropping and people that were essentially still stuck to the plots of land that their once slave owners controlled. So serious discrimination was still terrible. And again, this was still kind of like an extension of slavery. And once again, this issue would bottle up as the question of race in America, combined with the Cold War paranoia of communism due to the Soviet Union's rise as a global superpower, would again cause major political polarization over how to properly combat the Soviet Union and how to deal with the racial tension across the country due to racial discriminations. Eventually, though, despite the intense political polarization of the 1950s and 60s and 70s and all the political scandals and wars like Vietnam and the mass protests for civil rights, America found the ability to stick together enough to navigate several crises, resulting in the Civil Rights Act being passed, ending legal racial discrimination and segregation, as well as the United States working together to force the resignation of corrupt leaders like Richard Nixon and outlasting the Soviet Union in the Cold War through strategic pressure, eventually the Soviet Union collapsing in 1991. However, today Americans face their toughest tests of political polarization since the American Civil War, because we're dealing with a world that has been completely changed by technology in the age of the internet, with social media and now the rise of artificial intelligence. There's so many tools that can divide Americans faster than ever before, and when unregulated, these tools are easily taken advantage of by opportunists, where people who want to promote conspiracy theories and other anti-intellectual ideas, using their pre-existing cult of celebrity, can spread all sorts of information, especially in a society that is not well adapted for this new age of information due to the internet. And so you have lots of Americans that perhaps don't have much background knowledge on a lot of really important subjects and social issues, whether regarding science, history, or even politics in general. And as a result, now they're all of a sudden seeing tons of information online that is largely inaccurate, and it's being thrown at them left and right. And the platforms have not done a good job of trying to figure out how to mitigate the rise of this content. And of course, governments don't really want to regulate too much because you don't want to go after people's free speech. And so you have this kind of mess of information out there online that people aren't really sure how to navigate properly. And this, combined with the just glaring flaws in the American political system, which is now being exploited more and more as hyperpartisanship has risen with the partisan media and partisan influencer cultures that we have today. Gerrymandering to help politicians choose their voters is increasing over time. The unlimited amount of money being spent by the rich and the powerful organizations in the country to support their preferred politicians and influence elections is happening at record levels. And the various media personalities, whether on social media, YouTube, or on the old-fashioned media outlets in the news, are often now using digital communications to push extremely partisan agendas to kind of brainwash Americans to hold some type of extreme partisan view, which is now resembling in many ways kind of what you might see in truly authoritarian countries like Russia, for example, where there's really no interest now in trying to provide people objective information. Instead, many media personalities and influencers just want to promote their worldview and want people to adopt exactly what they think, instead of just giving the news. And to make matters even worse, on top of all these other problems, we have politicians that are openly supporting authoritarianism to either help themselves or to force their beliefs down the throat of other Americans. So America's in somewhat familiar territory in terms of the intense divide between Americans, but not in terms of the rise of people in positions of power and influence who no longer care about democracy or about seeking truth. So this, combined with all these issues, makes it so it's hard to know if bipartisanship is still possible, because we just don't know anymore if America has the ability to navigate this new era in history. Now, polling suggests that most Americans still believe in the importance of compromise, but what you say on a poll and actually being willing to take action and to show you truly believe in it are two different things. So all we really do know now is this. Yes, bipartisanship is possible. It's always possible. After all, our entire success as not only a country, but our entire success as a human species has been built on human societies finding common ground and compromise, because we need each other for survival. I mean, you wouldn't have any relationship with another human being without compromise. But as a country, whether America can find the bipartisan compromise needed to solve the current crises in America is to be determined. There is no law in the universe that states America must continue to exist and be a democracy and be a unified country. As a country, Americans need to decide that for themselves, because it's not just the legislators that must make compromises in this era of intense political polarization and misinformation and the polluting of American democracy and its political system, but also the voters need to choose those who will represent them and who will represent compromise. And the next few years in American history will tell us a lot about whether Americans truly want that or not. So for a country that's existed for almost 250 years now, it's definitely had a lot of success that is truly historic, navigating incredibly tough issues in an incredibly diverse society. It's a country that will be talked about and studied for generations to come. But whether future generations are studying the downfall of America or its continued success is a question that all Americans have to grapple with today. So as always, remember, billions of years led to you, so make the most of it.